Well, hello there, 3%ers. I am Rose, and I am so excited to be here with you today talking about simplicity for today's work from home caregivers. And I thought it would be a really great way to start by giving you a little glimpse into my life as a work from home caregiver. My husband took this picture about a week after the coronavirus lockdown hit us here in Ohio, where I live. And unbeknownst to me, he texted it to a colleague with these words: my office. And I think that many of us who are working from home and caregiving from home can relate to this, right? This is my living room in the middle of a pandemic. We have brought down a desk from upstairs. It's my daughter's sewing desk, and my husband is now using that to do his work as a corporate attorney right there in the living room. My kids, who are e-learning right now, it looks a little bit like Minecraft on this day, they are right there in the living room as well, doing what they're doing. And there's me in the front there. I can't get to my yoga studio to get my Zen time, to get my relaxation. And so I am doing my live streaming yoga, taking a little break from my work, and it's all happening in one place while we are all also trying to do our work and our professional jobs. So I wanted to share this with you just to give you an idea and let you know that if you feel like you're in a bit of a chaotic environment and you're struggling with trying to work from home and trying to take care of other people from home, realize that I totally feel you and I am there as well with you. But I wanted to back up a little bit from this moment. I want to back up about 8 years to tell you how I came to be a person who strives to live a life of simplicity. And my journey to simplicity starts about 8 years ago when I found myself in a very different working and caregiving situation, but I was working 2 full-time jobs. And many of you are probably familiar with this feeling. So I would get up in the morning and I would get to my first job by 7 a.m. And that was my job as a middle school English language arts teacher. The job I was paid for, right? So I would do my job all day, a job that I loved, caring for my students and helping them. And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I would get home. And at that point of the day, I clocked into my second full-time job, which is my job of being a mom to my then 2-year-old triplets. Yes, my children are triplets, and this is them at 2 years old, but please do not let this professionally posed photograph fool you. This is not an accurate representation of what my life was like at that time. But then I would do the mom job, right? The second shift. And so we would have dinner time and there'd be some play time and some story time and some bath time. And thank you, God, finally bedtime, right? Every parent's favorite time of the day. And by the time I got those kids into bed at night, if everything had gone according to my plan, which it didn't always, but if it had, I had maybe 1 hour to myself before I had to get myself to bed so that I could get up the next day and do it all over again. And all I wanted to do during that one precious hour of free time was sit down on my couch and relax. Now, I know that is all any busy parent wants to do at the end of a long day, but for me, it was especially important because I am a naturally introverted person, which means I need to refresh and refuel myself by having some alone time every day. And if I don't get that, I am no good to anyone else. But instead of relaxing and refreshing myself and having some time to myself, you know what I was doing during that one precious hour of free time? Dealing with my stuff. I was picking up toys and shoes and sippy cups and moving piles of paper from one counter to another because I didn't know what else to do with it. I was just trying to control the chaos. I didn't feel relaxed at home, and I didn't feel relaxed at work, and I didn't know what to do about that. And all of this stress came to a head about a week after Christmas in 2012. I was having lunch with a very good friend of mine, and I was lamenting to her about Christmas because I said, you know, we took the kids up to visit the grandparents, and they just gave them so much stuff. And we returned, and our van was just packed full of stuff, and I walked into the house, and I realized we didn't have room for the stuff we already owned. Where were we going to put the new stuff? I said, you know, I think I need to buy a bigger house. And my friend looked at me and she said, or you could just become a minimalist. And I thought to myself, like this girl who looks like she maybe just got back from a 10-day silent meditation retreat and just finished drinking a chai latte in her tiny house on the mountain, now she's meditating. I said, this isn't my life. I live in suburban Dayton, Ohio with 3 kids and 2 cars and stuff. Like, this isn't something I can do. My friend said, actually, minimalism or simplicity is just a philosophy. It's a way of living. Many modern Americans are adopting this, where they live with less stuff, thus less stress, thus more time for themselves. So I thought, less stuff, check. Less stress, double check. More time for myself, that's what I'm looking for. Absolutely, sign me up. So I went home from that lunch and I started reading books and blogs on the subject of minimalism and simplicity. And I was absolutely hooked. And so, over the course of the next 8 months, I let go of about 70% of our possessions. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but what's most important about this, it's not in what I let go. What was most amazing was what I discovered underneath. Because yeah, of course, I found the lids to the Tupperware and all the missing socks and the remote control that we thought we'd lost forever, found all that stuff. But what I truly found were these 3 amazing things. The first is free time. I started spending my evenings during that one precious hour sitting on my couch with a book and a mug of tea, and I felt at peace. So the second thing that I found was peace of mind. I realized I started feeling more relaxed in my home. I felt more relaxed at work. I felt comfortable with people just dropping by my home or dropping by my classroom. I no longer felt like I had to immediately apologize for the mess. And the third thing I found was clarity. For the first time since having my kids, I had the mental space to think and dream, which resulted in some really unexpected changes, like starting a business and writing a book, things I didn't even have the mental capacity to consider when I spent all my energy dealing with my stuff. So today, I want to talk to you about simplicity. I want to talk about what it is, why it matters now during this pandemic for work-from-home caregivers more than ever, and of course, how you could get started on your own simplicity journey today. So let's talk about what simplicity is. I want to share a definition with you that I follow, and it says simplicity is getting very clear about what you want and then having the guts to let go of everything else. And when I think about my journey, I think that I really followed this. I got very clear about what I wanted. I wanted 1 hour to myself at the end of the day where I was not serving my students, I was not serving my family, and I was not serving my stuff. I wanted an hour to serve myself. So I got very clear about that. And then I had to have the guts to let go of everything that was getting in the way of that time. And for me, that was a lot of physical stuff that I was spending my time and energy dealing with. And I very intentionally put the phrase have the guts in this definition because if you've ever tried to declutter a box of things in your garage or your basement, you've realized this is not necessarily easy, right? I often tell people when we're dealing with our stuff, we're not actually dealing with our stuff. What we're dealing with are our feelings and emotions about our stuff. Feelings and emotions can be difficult. So at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a few strategies to help you navigate through some of the emotional challenges that you might face when you start to deal with your stuff. Well, why does simplicity matter? We're going to take a little quiz here to test your stuff smarts. I'm a former teacher, so I always have to give a quiz. And I know that this is pre-recorded, but I still want you to come up with an answer and then check yourself to see if you're right. It's only 4 questions. Here we go. First question, what percentage of American garages are so full of stuff that homeowners can't park inside? What do you think? The answer is 75%, which is pretty staggering, right? 3/4 of us are not using our garages for the intended purpose, which for many of us, if you live in a state like Ohio, where I live, where there's winter, parking your car in the garage is pretty important, but 3/4 of us are designating that space for stuff that we're probably not using and that we probably don't love. Second question is true or false. Clutter competes for your attention and wears down your ability to focus. What do you think? I'm guessing most of you would say true, and it is true, but what's really interesting to me is that intuitively, many of us know this, right? We know that when it's cluttered, we're not focused as well, but the people at the Princeton University Neuroscience Institute, the very smart people there, actually did a study to scientifically prove that when we are in an environment with multiple visual stimulation, our brains cannot focus. So think about the fact that right now you are probably working from home where there is more visual stimulation, more clutter than maybe you're used to. Think back to that picture that I showed you at the beginning of this slideshow, right? My husband's legal papers spread all over the place. There were more cords because each of my kids now needed to have a laptop and my husband needed his 2 screens. So all of a sudden my living room that's normally very neat and tidy where I work from home is a completely different environment. And realize that if I sit down in that environment to try to talk to a client or work on a project, I cannot focus and my attention is sapped simply by the environment that I'm in. The last question of the quiz, a UCLA study found that working parents who described their homes as messy had increased levels of what in their saliva? If you guessed the stress hormone, cortisol, you are correct. Now, what's interesting to me about this study is they followed 32 dual income working families for 4 years, and this is one of the tests that they did. And what they found was that the stress response was entirely dependent upon the working parent's perception of the home. So if parent A described the home as messy, it's chaotic, it's just totally out of control, parent A had a stress response. Parent B in the same household could just say, yeah, this is what our house looks like, and there it is. And they did not have the response. So I think you're probably identifying with either parent A or parent B in that scenario, but realize that if you perceive your environment as chaotic, if you perceive it as messy and cluttered, you are actually in a state of stress. Your fight or flight response is activated. So one of the things that we can do is declutter our space, simplify our space, and it automatically lowers our stress response. This is the last question. I think I said the last one was the last. This is the last one. It's a 2-word phrase that refers to employees' inability to check their personal stress at the door when switching from home to work. And this phrase is negative spillover. So I want you to think about that, right? When you were possibly working outside the home, imagine in the morning when you got up, it was stressful at home. Maybe your shirt that you wanted to wear that day wasn't clean and the dog had a mess on the carpet and you got into an argument maybe with your partner. When you showed up at work that day, you brought all of that with you. Most of us can't check our stress at the door. Now I want you to think about the fact that there's not even a door for many of us between home and work. So if there is stress in our homes, we are bringing it with us to work every single day as we are working from home. Our stress doesn't even have to go on a commute to follow us to work. So how does simplicity help us right now? I'm going to give you 2 ways that simplicity is really key to the challenges that we are facing today. First is it reduces anxiety. When I did my TEDx talk a couple years ago, I had this one phrase that I put at the end of the talk, and I thought, man, when I deliver this phrase, people are going to say, yes, so deep, so philosophical. But when I said these words, the entire audience laughed. And I said this, the physical state of our homes mirrors the mental state of our heads. And I think people laughed because they immediately started picturing their garages, their closets, their attics, and they thought, oh my gosh, if that's what the garage looks like, what's going on in my head, right? So I want you to realize that when we think about our mental wellness and the state of our mind and our mental health, we often think of doing things like meditation and yoga. Those are all wonderful things to do. But another conduit to improved mental wellness is decreasing the physical chaos in your environment. So if you can create a tidy outer environment, you start to create a more open and light feeling inside. So it reduces your anxiety. The second thing that simplicity does to help us right now is it increases our productivity. Think back to the picture I showed you at the beginning of the slideshow. It was very difficult to be productive in that environment. So one of the things that I have always valued is advice from David Allen. If you know him, he is the author of Getting Things Done or the GTD system. He is arguably the productivity guru in the world. And I was listening to his podcast once and someone called in and said, David, I'm so overwhelmed with all the things I need to do. I just don't know where to start. I'm stalled. And so David's advice to this caller was this: when you don't know what else to do, clean house. Meaning if you're overwhelmed and you're not being productive, tidy up your workspace, tidy up the environment that you're in. And what that's going to do is create the mental clarity that you need to choose that first thing that you can work on that's going to move the needle and make you more productive. A quick story about my husband. Like I said, he's an attorney and he rarely goes to trial. Maybe once or twice a year does he actually go. Everything else settles. But last year he was going to trial. This case was not settling. The trial was on Tuesday. The weekend before, he said, I've got to go in the office and I've got to get some work done. I said, of course, go in. Comes back a few hours later. I said, well, how'd it go? What did you do? He said, well, you know what I did? I cleaned up my whole office. I tidied up the shelves. I cleaned off my desktop. I dusted. I took the pile of shredding that had been building up for the last year and I took it to the shredder box finally. I feel amazing. And so that's just an example of how when we don't know what else to do, when there's so many unknowns we can't prepare for, like a trial or a coronavirus situation or all the unknowns, we don't know if our kids are going to be going back to school or not or what that's going to look like. One of the things we can do is we can clean house, we can tidy our environment, and it's going to make us more productive and it's going to make us feel a lot better. And by the way, he won that trial with a unanimous verdict. So go Josh. All right, so you're in, but how do you start? I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice that answer most of the questions I get about how to begin this process. And the first is start with your own stuff. I know, the whole time you've been listening to me, you've been saying, well, this is great, but the person who really needs to hear this is my partner, or the problem is really my kids. And I will tell you, a wise man named Gandhi once told us, be the change you wish to see in the world. I will tell you, be the change you wish to see in your home. If you desire to be in a clutter-free, simple environment, start with the areas you can control. Your personal care products, your clothing, if you're in charge of the cooking, the things in the kitchen. And what will happen is your example will ripple out and affect the people that you live with. Second piece of advice is to start somewhere easy. Remember when I told you that when we're dealing with our stuff, we're not dealing with our stuff, we're dealing with our feelings about our stuff? As such, don't start where the feelings are high. Don't start with the memorabilia and the photographs and the gifts. Start where it feels easy, where the emotional connection is low. When I started my journey, I started with my towels. In retrospect, that's because I don't have a lot of emotional connection to my towels, so it was an easy place to start. So think about the stuff in your house or your environment that you control, that's yours. And secondly, think of the things that would feel easy to begin with, and that's where you should start. If you want to continue the simplicity conversation with me, which I would love, here are a few ways that you can do that. You could join my email list by texting the word simple to 773-770-4377. You could check out my book. It's called Less, Minimalism for Real, and you can find it on Amazon. You could visit my website at roselounsbury.com. You can find all things Rose Lounsbury there. Or if you're a social media person, we could connect on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. I want to thank you all so much for your time and attention today. I am so grateful that you chose to spend some time with me learning about simplicity, and I want to challenge you to go forth and create an environment outside and inside that feels relaxed and open and productive. Bye, guys.